I'm Michael Anthony Macharia. I'm the host with this amazing guests who are going to introduce themselves. And today's topic, which is around fear in scaling from corner to giant shop, really addresses the conversation on what it takes to build a business and how you move from being a kiosk, as we call it in Africa, and then to a major conglomerate. And it's not easy. So we are going to explore the challenges, the intrigues, the impact it has to you as an individual, the societal pressure, and also at the same time, the whole political alignment towards you becoming a big brand in your own country, and also as you grow this brand to become a global organization when you have to. So welcome to the show. I'm gonna introduce my guest, but rather than me introducing them, I'd like them to introduce themselves, but also with a vision where they can also explain how they view this whole conversation around their own domain and around what they've been able to accomplish in the last few years. I guess most of them is 20 plus years when it comes to growing businesses. So I'd like to start with Peter Kenneth Nduati.
All right. Thanks for having me. So as you heard from Mike, my name is Peter Nduati. I have accepted the brand entrepreneur as what as what people see me at, but I'm known by different things from different people. Many people know me as a songwriter, producer, people who do know me as an insurer, financial services, and people who know me as a trader. So I sit as chairman of Peter Nduati Group, and in that group there are 7 businesses in different areas, from marketing, from alcohol distribution, from beverages distribution, import, export. Peter Nduati Consulting, which is a business, the latest venture where I serve SMEs mostly on business transformation based on the things that I've done. And my story of scaling is across Africa is of interest. I've gone as far as Sudan, where they're fighting. I've set up a business there and part of de-risking from the Kenyan market. And that gut fear is what we run on. And as I was telling you about breakfast, a lot of us romanticize entrepreneurship, making decisions on the fly without enough data, and it's aligned to the conversation we are having today. So thanks for having me.
So let's go to Lenny. Lenny Nganga next, and then maybe he just also explains his industry, and maybe just get to know more about Lenny.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. And I think this is a fantastic concept, and I'm very happy to be here. Because one thing I find is that as African entrepreneurs, we really don't share our stories. Uh-huh. And I think this is a fantastic forum that you've put together to enable us to do this. So my name is Lenny Nganga. I've been in the advertising and marketing business for the last 30 years, but 22 of which with my own company, which is called the Saracen Marketing Group. Started life as a singular media agency. We just used to deal with media planning and buying a specialist part of the advertising continuum. But now as the marketplace has evolved and media types have evolved, then we've added on different services. So now we've gone into creative, we've gone into influencer marketing, we've gone into data and analytics, all of which are in the quest to serve our customers in the best way possible. So we started off in Kenya, and then we went to Uganda, we went to Tanzania, we'd even gone to Rwanda, and we also service our clients in the South Sudan, Ethiopia, Burundi, and sometimes Malawi, Zambia. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So it will be an interesting story to hear more of your personal journey, both from as a founder, having scaled a business across multiple countries. So over to Pauline, who I know for very many years, and now last few years, she's been an entrepreneur, but also having built the largest teams for some of the largest corporates in the country. Pauline?
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to be here. As you say, my name is Pauline Warui. I've just listened to Peter Nduati talking about being called an entrepreneur. Having come from a corporate world, I'm the typical entrepreneur who goes into business in Africa because you have nothing else to do or because times have caught up with you. So generally, I left the corporate world 10 years ago. and I started my own company. It's called East Africa Customer Care Center. I had to learn the ropes of managing a small thing, let me call it that way, having managed big corporate, learning how to budget the small money that you have. So for me, my entrepreneur journey is typically what happens to most Africans, be it because of COVID, be it because you lost your job, or be it because you went into hard times. So I set up an organization called East Africa Customer Care, now 9 years old. And I've just ventured, last year I ventured into the Ugandan market. Beyond that, I've become an investor in various organizations. An organization called Zazela. Zazela is an e-market, an e-commerce place. So trying to penetrate markets, Uganda, Kenya, now venturing into Zambia. So that typically is my journey of being an entrepreneur.
So interesting, Pauline, and having known you a bit and long in this ecosystem, I think it'll also be interesting for you to share how you sort of help companies that are scaling, and what you generally see goes wrong as these companies scale. Because I'm sure you've worked for companies that have scaled, others that have scaled and tanked, and we could learn a few lessons on what, as a third party, you saw when you worked with these companies. What did you see differently? Well, coming back to cycling back to the next conversation is really laying the foundation, the why, in terms of why scale. And this also comes to a point where we need to talk about our own stories. And this is an interesting part of the conversation because it lays bare where we talked about unfiltered conversations, where you really talk about your journey and where you think you are, where you think you may have derailed, if so, where you think you could derail, and also where you think you could be in the future. So I'll start with my story. My story, actually, funny enough, I started my business exactly 25 years ago, and had only worked for my first employer for only 4 years. I only had one employer. I would say I was an intern and one employer. A great individual I worked for, in a company where he gave me lots of autonomy at a very young age. And I would call myself an accidental founder or an accidental entrepreneur. I found myself in a bar in Carnival in Simba Salon with a potential customer who started talking to me. And the next thing I find myself in Rwanda trying to implement for the Rwanda airline, which is now Rwandair, or is it Rwanda Airways? Is it Rwanda Airways? Yes. Rwandair. Mm-hmm. Their fast technology platform. Funny enough, I then ventured from there to Uganda. Again, met somebody on a flight going to Dubai, who then became my partner in Uganda, a successful businessman in Uganda today. Another founder I would like actually to talk to at some point. And then eventually, funny enough, came back to Kenya. And what we did in Rwanda is what we started replicating in our markets here. So eventually, being a finance person, ended up running a technology company with a lot of technology people. There are some interesting stories going to India to look for resources in a very, very niche area where Kenyans had not built that capability then. And then building this business across multiple countries as a technology company, moving from infrastructure to larger platforms, whether it's software, whether it is platforms, representing some of the biggest brands in the country, in the world today, where we became some of the biggest players in the marketplace. Build a business significantly to become the largest local IT integrator to companies like Safaricom, for instance, where we were the largest with a significant workforce that worked for them. Then build a business into other markets like Ethiopia, which was a very interesting market, closed market, currency issues, learned a lot in that market. Again, beauty of youth. You go to a market, you don't think about all these issues, you build a network. Expanded that business into other markets like Zambia, went to Burundi for projects, went to Zimbabwe for projects, went to Nigeria, went to Ghana, invested in companies in Portugal in the software arena, and raised capital from both angel investors to venture capital. But to be honest, things happened, things grew. And I'm not going to spend time about what it takes to build a workforce or what it takes to raise capital. Those are things we're going to discuss later. and what it takes and the toll it takes on you. But I think starting a business early allowed me to be able to take significant risk, because I was not thinking about school fees. I was not thinking about if I fail, what's going to happen tomorrow. I was not thinking if I failed, what people are going to say about me. So I guess I would encourage many people to start businesses when they're young. But the story where things start going crazy is whereby as you scale, you need more capital. And definitely you realize you're losing control of your business because you have to bring investors in your business who definitely you start realizing don't have the say. You have to be able to create some level of engagement with your investors to have this conversation. But to a large extent, where I know that the rain started hitting us was when we started having what we call single customer risks. So yes, you build a business, massive business. You have two options. One option is to build multiple customers who then you distribute your risk. But in my case, my first risk was building my business first through private sector and having one large customer who controls 70% of my business. Now, what happens in a business like that, if, for instance, you're doing $1 billion plus from one customer, and there's a change of management in that customer, because CEOs change, management change. The next thing, without realizing, all of a sudden, because you're doing massive business with that customer, because of change of management, there's such significant level of political headwinds that hit you. And all of a sudden you realize that the same customer that you're serving diligently, the politics within the organization become your biggest challenge. And we move from, believe it or not, we move from $1 billion shillings revenue from this customer to less than 50 million within 14 months. You think a customer like that, where you've put 60% of your workforce under one customer, the risk is so tremendous, right? Such that how do you retool that new workforce? How do you get all this workforce from one company that gave you all this revenue and now move that to another company? That was very challenging for me as an entrepreneur. So you move from significant revenue, having significant shareholders in your business who invested because of that opportunity. Now you think, what do you do? So we retooled ourselves, good or not good. I decided, look, I'm not going to get myself in this position again. But I think I did again, and we never learned. I found myself now with the next big customer, which was government. Now, government, I thought, what possibly could happen, really? Yeah, there's not going to be change of management, but that didn't really work like that. So we found ourselves again in the heart of government, massive project, 5 billion shilling project with government, X amount of employees, many employees work. So for me, the story as I hand it over to Mr. Nduati is saying and looking at our story from that point, creating context. What is the risk of scaling your business? And what does it do to you as an individual? Also from a brand point of view. You go everywhere you go in town, people know your name. You stand out there in the traffic, people want your name, people know your name. People send you CVs. Politicians look for you. Every funeral you have to be called to. These are all challenges that come with scaling your business. And this is risk that you have to deal with. Now, you also become a target in many environments, right? You become a target, right? You become a target. We're going to talk about later why do people say don't become big because KRA is going to come to your business. It's okay. With governance, you have to deal with all these issues because KRA is KRA. They want tax. Yes, you've said you've just made X amount of money. Naturally, KRA is going to come to your business and ask you where's the money if it doesn't tally to the back office of their tax collection capability. There's also the issue of investors who then invest in your business. And when that fallout happens, for instance, how many of those investors are going to stay with you? Because sometimes the question is, are you the problem? But how are you the problem, for instance, if you couldn't control what the government did, for instance? You become the problem. So how do you build moving on? Subsequently, I built another business, which was, I decided, will never find myself in this position again. I decided to build what we call a consumer-led business, which is what we are building called Ponea Health. And then I said, I'll make sure I'll never be a servant to somebody who holds me by my neck and says you can't move. So that's a different conversation. And that also is an interest in business. Also, you also remember that even as you scale a business, a consumer-led business, the challenges are also very different, right? You move away from one large customer, and now you're moving towards consumer-led business. So I would like to stop there. At least I've set the context.
Mike, you and I met at Young Chief Executives Forum.
Yes.
I was 31. And we had gone into business. And we couldn't find mentors, some people to guide each other. So we decided as a group of young people, let us mentor each other. So that's how Young Chief Executives were formed. And we used to meet like once a month in forum just to help each other. I went into business, my main business, insurance, after working for the market leader in the space. And you hit the glass ceiling in the business. You try and introduce ideas in the products to your employer for reasons sometimes political. The product is rejected, and you're young. You decide, why can't I go out and do this for myself? Fortunately, for the employer who I had worked for previously had exposed me in the East African market. So I had worked in different countries. So even when I registered my first business, I had to put East Africa on it. Although it was downtown in Court's house, in like a small room, I started with the end in mind. I kept asking myself when I went into business, can this be a 1 billion Kenya shillings business then? 1 billion was a lot of money 25 years ago. Bootstrapping, raising capital. I raised money from friends and family. Please note, I entered an industry that was unregulated. It was in the insurance space, but the category, health insurance, was unregulated. Previously, there were companies called HMOs that came and left. A lot of white people led. That was also another challenge that I was competing with CEOs that were white, and they were able to penetrate in places that I could not get into. But I kept to my faith because I had the experience. And of course, I knew I had time because I was young. So yeah, quickly, 18 months, raised the capital required. I took myself to the regulator and say, how do we regulate this particular space? It's a very weird position to be that industry is now fully regulated, but me and 2 other people went and said, look, we want to get regulated because being regulated helped confidence. When you're doing a service business, it's about you and what people perceive of your brand. So within 4 years, I knew this was the right business. We had broken even. My partners could see value. Fortunately, 2 of the investors in my business were also insurers. So they were not only mentoring me in the space, but they could see the journey. An industry where it wasn't profitable, so you are growing to sell. So you already know that you're growing this business to create a brand, have a customer base, but eventually you'll exit. 6 years after running it, back in the market raising money. Because you want to grow. And that time you just want to grow in Kenya. Open a branch, get out from that small space in city center to get your own space, to opening a branch in Nakuru, Uganda, Kisumu, Mombasa. And then one of the errors that I made, I was so focused on beating for my employer that even when we became bigger, I surpassed it. And it was a very narrow vision at that particular time. So yeah, 6 years later, raised capital from an angel, grew the business. Again, still in Kenya. In 2008, decided to get out of Kenya into other markets. And my reasons were valid at that particular moment. We've just gone post-election violence. The economy is kind of tanked. And then you want to diversify, not the offering of the product, but diversify to a different audience and spread your risk across. So Tanzania was, for me, the natural place to go because I had worked in Tanzania for my former employer. So I had a natural market. I knew I knew the lay of the land. But that was also very tough because I go to Tanzania, and the Tanzania government, the first thing they tell me, we cannot accept this brand because it doesn't have the word insurance in the name for your business. So you have to register a company with the word insurance in it. And I did. And for that reason, I had to become a general insurer. They didn't have a category for health insurance. Remember, I'm a monoline player. I'm not a general insurer.
When you say monoline, you mean like?
One product. I used to do health only. That's what since the 90s, that's all I had done and I understood it. But now you're being forced to bring new skills. You need to understand the culture. You enter in the Tanzanian market, first of all, before you sell the product, you have to explain Bima ya Afya, what it means to the person then you sell the product to them. So you're not only introducing the industry, your brand, then your product. And we did well in Tanzania because we understood and studied it. But still, you don't have data. Now, of course, naturally, the next country you want to go to is where? Uganda. Uganda, there was no regulation, so you go with the original structure. In fact, Uganda, we even used to run clinics. It was the health value chain. You enter there, again, a different level of regulation. Culture, again, totally different. But you also, although you're growing the business, operating cash flows. So you have to raise money. So on the 10th year, we took PE money, private equity money from Germany. We sold 25%. So we all got diluted, no one exited. And we continue running the business. Opportunity come, South Sudan, a new country, health insurance. So in South Sudan, you could not enter at that particular time without a local. So we partnered with a local insurance company. So now I'm running Kenya, wholly owned. I'm the CEO. I'm also group, so I'm running Tanzania. As a general insurance company, we are doing all lines of insurance. I'm running Uganda, including health provision, not just insurance. Then you go to Sudan, you're running a partnership, a JV. That complexity. Now you're managing board members from a PE fund who have an internal rate of return, 25% that they want by the time they're exiting. So they kind of own you. You have your local partners who have not had dividends now, it's 10 years, not 12 years, and they're getting antsy. Some of this includes family, there are people around you. And then you're thinking, I still want to grow this business. Because eventually, my mind, I was going to sell the company. So that level of complexity. And every time you take money, there's a word that follows money called covenant. Nobody gives you money and tells you, oh, go do what you want to do. Oh, I want a right to personnel. I want a right to strategy. I must get a board position. Or some people will come and say, the chairman has to be us. Your agenda has to be drawn by us. Whereas you started a business for freedom and independence, now you go to a situation where you're owned by other people. But that PE fund was excellent in terms of giving me value, training. They wanted to focus on impact. So I'm telling my original funders, be patient. Be patient. We will make money. And they did. My original funders left. There's one partner who left with 8 times money. And I can give you indications. I have a person who gave me 4 million shillings in 2003. And I bought him for 400 million. So I made my investors money. Even the original PE fund that came in, they bought 25%. At the time of exiting, they left with their target IRR. So, but you have these dreams. I wanted to be number one in the space, and I became number one in the space. But I also wanted to be number one in Africa. But this time now, you also have to think about this family. You don't have the same level of energy. And then sometimes you need to taper down your ambition. But in the middle of the 2014, I started feeling I need to go into other lines of business. For now, de-risking me as a person, because the industry had become very complex. And now I'm in 7 African countries, and I've been depending on a salary. So the liquidity, I thought, is the time to cash out. And one of my first regrets is selling the company. So initially, I was going to sell a percentage to cash out, but the party wanted control, and they wanted an anchor in the Kenyan market. So initially sold majority, then eventually exited. But our exited and stayed a year for stakeholder management. You get put on what they're called golden handcuffs. During that pace of scaling is where now the first mistake happened. Because you have a strategy that is misaligned. Your partner wants to have a branch in every county. They want you to do everything kind of, like, I don't have an experience in engineering insurance. So you're getting an insurer who can underwrite that. You're trying to get a technical person who understands that. All of a sudden, you have a group structure where there's a group head of risk. The companies have a head of risk. So you're managing a very complex business. And you're no longer the vision carrier, because now it's owned by other people. Boardroom fights, that happens to most of us. One day when I tell my story, I need to talk about how you select the right partner and what covenants you should give up on. Within a year of selling the business, and I had actually left the country, I thought I should buy it back. And that was another regret because it took me a while. Regulator bought battles. The fact that you've aligned with an individual, with the partners that you want to buy the company back, you're raising money at the back end to buy the business back. It doesn't look the same. Now you're doing motor insurance, which is a killer. So the funders eventually ended up selling the business to someone else, and we know what had happened with our business. What I did well for me is taking the money out and investing in different sectors. But just like Mike, I went and got in an agency. We had one major customer, one. So again, now you're going into a business, you want to grow, but you also need to de-risk because you're dealing with a powerful party. And now you're also going into an industry where you're new, you're learning at the same time. Well, we managed to conquer that. We de-risked the business. And then because of aligning my personal brand to a business brand, which is, it could be right or wrong. But at that particular time, when I just saw Michael Joseph, who was CEO of Safaricom, and I thought, every time you see Michael Joseph, Safaricom is the same party. And actually, when even Bob Collymore came, it was the same thing that I saw, and I like giving those two examples. So I felt, and the advice that I took was, your personal brand should be also your business brand. But you've sold the company, so any error being made there, it's you. The other time in 2021, I trended for 6 days. My name. There was even a whole article, the rise and fall of the insurance maverick, But you cannot tell the story. And I still haven't told that story, which I plan to. Meanwhile, the people tanking your business are in London somewhere, sitting comfortably. Nobody knows them. So now court battles. And that's the reason I started when we were having breakfast about romanticizing entrepreneurship. I didn't listen to my gut, so I sold. But you sell and you don't tell the story that you've sold. So you're going to the streets and everybody is telling you. I went downtown Maryland in a supermarket. Someone told me, you stole $6 billion and ran away to America. And you're there with your children and they know the story. Then why don't you answer back? Is it because people have a perception of you? And the truth always comes out at the end of the day. So that was a very tough time for me as an entrepreneur.
Lenny, over to you. Very keen to hear how your industry operates.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so just to give a bit of context, especially around this discussion of scaling, is around, there's two stories. I worked for two global advertising companies before I started Saracen with three other partners. And one thing I got to realize is the year I think was 2000, and an edict came down from New York and said that all offices must reduce headcount by 6%.
60.
6%. Very specific number. Because the chairman of this agency had made a promise to Wall Street that he was going to deliver a particular profit number. And it was not looking like it was going to be possible. So the only way to do that was to reduce headcount. At that time, I was running a unit here in Kenya, and we just won significant business. And I'm being asked to cut 6% of people, and I was actually in the process of hiring. So it was a very tough time, and it was a bit of a tussle. Eventually, I ended up preserving the jobs of the people who were working with me. But that is something I said to myself, if I ever start a company, this is something I'll never do. Right. I'll never sacrifice people specifically for the sake of profit. I saw it happening. The second instance was a time when people were being promoted, and they would always bring white people from outside. Black guys who were there, who were even like deputy MD, are passed over. Somebody else comes in and is put in there because they're white. And there was a time even when we had one guy who was coming to replace an MD who had resigned. This guy had first of all was being brought in as a GM, then he got promoted to deputy MD and then to MD before he landed in Kenya. When he landed, he was a disaster. I mean, like, you get a CEO, their first memo is that no one should have more than 2 teaspoons of sugar. What kind of person is that? Because they're not qualified for the position. So for the first time ever in this company's history, we had a rebellion and we said we're not going to work with this CEO. So they had to get rid of him. And what did they do? They brought in another white guy who actually used to report to me and now became my CEO. That's when we realized that there was a black ceiling. Not a glass one, a black one. And that's when we decided we have to leave and get out of this company, but also make sure that anytime we have a company, whatever company we're going to build, people are going to be promoted on merit and nothing else. So those are some of the founding tenets that we decided we were going to start the company with. And when we got out of this employment, we agreed with my business partners we were going to save enough money for us to live for a year without a salary at the same level of life we were living at. So we had been saving up. So then when we jumped out, then we started running the company. And of course, it was not easy. We were very lucky in that there's one friend, the late Sharad guy, who actually gave us a fully furnished office in a very nice location, Mobile Plaza, Muthaiga, here. He gave us the office and told us, you guys pay me when you can.
Wow.
That was
Did he ask for shares?
No.
Okay.
Because I mean, we had no income, we had nothing at the moment at that time. And we learned some very interesting lessons there. Because like one big client was actually pitching their business, and we had been handling that business like 6 months prior, before we started the agency. And we went and we pitched for it. And one of the reasons why we didn't get the business was one person sitting in the room said, these guys want to finance their business using our cash flows. Despite the fact that we were the best at the job, but we didn't get it. So we had to scale organically. And that old adage of it takes 1,000 days to stabilize a business was very true. It took us 3 years basically to get into a stable position. But we had some great clients who took a leap of faith with us. Like one of them was the late Harald Schmidberger, who owned Red Bull and also Mamba Village and so on. He was quite a character. But he came along with us when we left and he said, it was not the company's name that was running my business, it was you guys.
Yes.
So he helped us in that way in terms of like injecting capital, but we grew organically and it was quite tough. But when we got to the 1,000-day mark and started stabilizing, then that's when we started thinking about opening other branches. And then the first one to open was Uganda. And that was natural progression for us because one of my business partners' wife was Ugandan. So it was okay for him to move there and also with his family and establish a business there. And the model we decided we were going to be taking is when we go into a new market, we look for local partners who can help us to open doors and inject some expertise, give them a minority shareholding, but we retain the majority. And that's the model we went with in Uganda. So Uganda also went on, took a while, but it grew and mostly servicing clients out of Kenya. And then Uganda was quite stable and running okay. Then we decided now in 2011, it was time to open Tanzania. This is 9 years after we opened Kenya. And we did the same thing. A local partner with a minority shareholding. But this one was a disaster. The partner talked a very good game. And you know, in Tanzania, finding great talent is not easy.
It's tough.
So we found this partner, talked a very good game. We agreed, yes, started the agency. The company started running quite well. But 2 years later, we got hit by the taxman. And the taxman uncovered some things that had been going on in that company that were being done that we didn't know. And it taught us a very painful lesson there. Controls. Because we were scaling, and we were scaling using our own so-called expertise and thinking that everything is going to run the same way we run it here in Nairobi, and expecting that the Tanzania partner was going to do the same, but it wasn't. So we ended up with some pretty large fines, and eventually even this partner actually took some money out of the business, fraud, as it were. Yeah.
Wow.
So we had to cover that now from the funds that we are running with in Nairobi. And that also gives us a large fear of bringing on board anybody else, because you're not sure what kind of partner you're going to get. Lucky for us, the partners in Uganda were very exemplary people, and they're very stand-up people, and they actually help the business. Tanzania is a different story. So that's one of the biggest fears for us has always been, what kind of partner are we going to get? Because we also opened an office in Rwanda. And Rwanda, I mean, it was amazing. The experience was amazing at the time, because in Kenya it used to take, I think, something like 21 days to register a company. Rwanda, we did it in 24 hours. We couldn't believe how quick it was. But the mistake we made, we had not properly sized the market. When we went in and realized the market was too small for our specialist skill. Remember, at that time, we were only dealing with one aspect of advertising. So after about a year, we had to shut down the business. It was just not viable. So that's another thing, that when you're scaling, you have to really look at the market, look at the size of the market, and understand the potential for your business in that market. Yeah.
That brings me Pauline, who I've worked with also in Safaricom, in some projects. Now she's an entrepreneur. At some point, she can tell us how many people. She basically may be one of the people I know who has built the largest teams under her at a country level. Because also as you scale, people become your biggest asset. How do you scale at a Pan-African level? How do you even scale at a country level? So over to you, Pauline.
All right. Yes, Mike. Scaling. Let me first start from my own perspective of really who I am and how I got to be able to scale. I think one of the things that I look at when we look at even businesses is who you are as a person. Where did you come from? I'm a child of 2 teachers, primary school teachers. So discipline is key. I'll keep time. I will remember I did not do something, because we also grew up in the generation of being whipped. You knew you would be whipped by end of day. You'd just go and check somewhere behind, and you would see very well, some small whips waiting for you because you misbehaved. So we are children that were brought up through a very disciplined system. And then, having been brought up by teachers, I believed in working diligently. So it is you go to school, you finish university, you join a company, you work very hard. Because deep down, you can hear your mother's voice or your father's voice. It never left you, it has never left us, that you have to do what is right. And for me, I became corporate. I went into organizations. I did so well. Why? Because I was disciplined enough, and my mother always used to say, you must work hard, you must be disciplined. And I didn't know these were very key, fundamentals in forming me into becoming, growing in my career. And as I grew in my career, at no point was my vision entrepreneur. That word belonged to other people. And so I joined organizations. I worked for organizations like Capital Pages. That's Capital FM. I worked for Kensel, Celtel, Airtel Now. I moved into Chevron Oil, East Africa, Egypt. And then I joined Safaricom. And I was a star in my career. But then one day, I was told, thank you. It's been real. But before that, I would say I looked, because of the discipline, the understanding of what I'm doing, the looking around to see where is this business going. Because also, one of the things that you realize when you're in a corporate world, when you are like your employees now, or our employees, the way they look at us, we are supposed to facilitate. Yes. You're supposed to give them money to go and do this or this and that. So scaling was strategically also supported by the organization. However, I had a good mind. Like I remember when I joined Safaricom, I found the organization thinking about outsourcing the call center. And I remember going to Michael and telling him, Michael, I'm going to move this resort from here to here. And he told me, are you sure? And I told him, yes, I'm going to do it. And for sure, when I walked in, I remember we were picking about 12,000 calls a day. And with the same team, I had moved it to 23,000. Because I was looking, people think customer care, because that's what I was doing, is really about just talking to customers nicely. It's really also a resource planning issue. It's a numbers game. You have all these calls coming in. You have all these requirements for the customers. You have this limited resources, and you have to balance out. And these are some of the lessons that I learned from there, so that even when you are scaling, you're actually scaling using tangibles. You're not just scaling. Now, my story starts when on March 20th, it's actually almost 10 years to date, when I walked out and I remember I was called and I was told, thank you.
Kwaheri.
Kwaheri, bye, thanks. 45 years of age, 20 years career came to a halt. I didn't know anything else. I only knew, and that's why I talked about being a child of teachers. Teachers who were born, they became teachers, they retired teachers, and they died teachers. I was in the same trajectory. Going on, I started thinking, what do I do? I have read all these stories that you do what you know. Don't go settling into doing things you don't know. And I started toying with the idea of opening my own office. And remember, the office I know is C-suite. So where do I go? In the middle of Kilimani, I look for a good office. It's already done, but my office cannot look like this. My office has to be corporate. People who come and see me, when you're talking of the office of being given, me, I'm losing my savings to make an office that is typically my standard. And then I have no client. Who do I call? These people, they used to come to me. Now, how do I transform into the person calling people to ask them for something, whereas it is me they used to come to ask for business? And so I started my journey there. Getting the legal services to register the company. Please note, I've never registered companies, because why? I am corporate. I have all the good things in life, driver, security. I'm okay. So I registered the company through the learning. This is my first step. So it's baby steps into entrepreneurs. And I'm talking to that person also in the corporate world who is sitting there and knows at the end of it, you have to come back to where we are. And I remember then, after starting the company, I started talking to people. And I'm feeling ashamed because I look like a beggar. How am I calling you and telling you, you remember me? It is Pauline Warui. And one day, and I don't even know, I have hired and scaled a big business. Yes. But I've never done it on my own for myself. I don't even know how to sell myself. I sold myself last at an interview. And then my brand was, I remember going to Rwanda immediately thereafter, and I just went to have to steam out. And at the airport, I remember those forms you fill. And I always used to feel Safaricom, director. Mm-hmm. When I had to fill that form, I looked. The partner always knew what he was. I did not know who I was. And for a minute, I was like, what do I feel here? Yeah? And it was even, I think my passport had expired and I had to fill for a passport also. And I was wondering, what do I feel? Because I can't feel entrepreneur. No way. Yeah? So by and by, I remember now, after talking to various people, my first client was Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. And I'm forever grateful to that lady called Lucy, who was there acting as the head. And she told me, I would like you, you're so good in what you do. Why don't you come and train my people? And I remember we went to Kenya School of Law, and I will never forget the moment. I didn't even care for the money, but I cared to see that for the first time, somebody has commissioned me to actually do something as myself, not as Pauline of Safaricom. And those water bottles up to today, you know, the way you enter training and the 2 water bottles are there. They actually touched me so much that I gave it on my own. And at the end of the day, and I had a team, I had 16,000 shillings, which we shared equally. And I was like, I'm in the game. And from there now I got confidence because I didn't even know how, creating this content. I used to call the trainers, have you trained these people? Have you done? And, this is the thing that you need to learn as an entrepreneur. Where do I start? Who am I? What do I need to put in place? What are the requirements? Are you ed to ed, or are you privileged because maybe your first deal is because you got a government deal because I know so and so. So these are some of the lessons, and I think I'll give it back to you, Mike, so because I can talk for a day. Yeah, about scaling the business and the challenges and entrepreneurship.
Me, first of all, I've just been. I think you're a good storyteller. I'm just smiling. Because everything you say, I can relate. Yeah. But something else you've said interesting, which adds to some of the episodes we talked about, is the issue of the people network that you have. Your network is a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. It works, and sometimes can work against you. So it's knowing how to build that network. But also, my hope, and part of why we are doing this, and we have talked about it, is there could be somebody today in your position, Pauline, previously, 20 years ago, who today is sitting on a decision. For a founder who they just require that opportunity to become the next big thing. Is that correct? Yes. That guy will choose to give that transaction to somebody else, and you ask them why, they'll justify all risks possible. Mm-hmm. Some of the people who helped me scale, to be honest, I never ever had dinner with them. I never sat with them for breakfast. I never did lunch with them. They just said, you're good at what you do. I will support you.